Hello, everyone. Thanks for being there, joining the session. I see like 1,000 people over there. Just don't show the room to the camera. Yeah, observation-based product development using Flutter. Let's go. Shortly, well, what I'm going to talk to today is basically, the introduction, what the app observation is, and also then we'll get deeper into the specific categories of that. So that's, app behavior monitoring, user feedback, and product metrics. For those who don't know me, I'm Mangirdas Kazlauskas. I'm a software engineer from Lithuania. Currently, I'm working as a mobile tech lead at Billow. And yeah, creating Flutter apps there is happily my day-to-day business. I'm also a Google developer expert for Flutter and Dart technologies. On the side, I'm organizing local meetups in Lithuania. And for those who know me from Twitter, I am your go-to Flutter meme person. These are my children, so you have like 3 seconds to admire them. Okay, app observation 101. So yeah, what is this thing is all about? To me, I split the app observation in 3 main parts. So one of those is app performance, then product performance, and UX or user experience. So app performance is basically a technical app monitoring, measuring all of those geeky metrics like latency, request response times, maybe frame drops, error counts, and whatnot. When we talk about product performance, that could be considered as analytics or basically monitoring of how your app performs as a product, as a business. So measuring, how users are using your app, whether they are satisfied, whether they cover all of the main business cases and so on. And then, of course, there's user experience. So basically, it's more about soft skills as an engineer to get deeper into this, but basically understand how users feel about your app, what is their feedback, and how to accept that and how to improve a product based on that. And you may ask why the app observation is needed at all. And I think that the main case is, yeah, app observation allows you to learn from your mistakes as soon as possible. Meaning if you're launching a new product and the app observation is there, so you have all of the metrics already prepared for the app, you're seeing all of those fancy dashboards. So you can see the data live, you can iterate on this and improve your product day by day. This is basically the structure of today's talk. So I mentioned there are 3 main categories of app observation. So I split each of those into several smaller ones. So when we are talking about app behavior, we'll be talking about logging, crash and error reports, also known as crashlytics, also performance metrics. Then we'll get a little bit deeper into user feedback. So, the software part of this presentation. So that's internal, external feedback. And then we'll end the presentation with product metrics, and these are app metrics and analytics. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into app behavior monitoring. And I would like to start with some numbers. So 42% of 1-star reviews on Google Play mention bugs, and even 84% of users abandon an application after seeing 2 crashes. Meaning, by the way, these numbers, that's not my research. I found those numbers in the Bugsnag report, and Bugsnag is a company who are creating error monitoring and app stability management tool, and they are making those reports every year, even more often sometimes. So the thing about this is that it doesn't matter if your app is really great as a business, maybe it solves a problem better than any other app in the world, but as long as your app is crashing, very slow, user will probably abandon the app. So keeping the pulse on this technical side of the app is really important. So it all starts with logging, because that's, I think, logging. First of all logs matter, meaning when you are developing locally, you see the logs in console, you see the logs of your own application, you see logs from dependencies, you see logs maybe from other integrations. And while developing, these are crucial because basically logs identify the initial problem, if there is any in your app. And then there's a question, how much should I log? So my answer to this is basically log everything by default, or at least as much as you can pay for. And yeah, especially when launching a new product, you will probably have no idea, or you won't be quite sure how your app will perform in public. because that your app probably will be installed on various different devices on different platforms. When we're talking about Flutter, of course, we are not even talking about only iOS or Android. We are talking about even more different platforms and views. So yeah, so just log everything. Later on, iterate on that. You'll see that some logs overlap each other. You see that maybe on different environments, some environments need less logging than on production or vice versa. So yeah, start big and then get smaller and reduce your costs for those. And also have in mind that logging is only a prerequisite for app monitoring, because logs by definition and by the essence, I would say, is just entries in a text file. And to get the information from there is, basically getting through the file and read that. But if you want to really monitor what's happening with your app, you need probably use some external tools, or at least tools who make the reading of the logs easier, like grouping, providing more information about the logs and maybe about the context of the app that produced those logs. So yeah, so logs are there, but to make the monitoring of them efficient, you need to use something extra. So for instance, in our apps, we're using Datadog, which is quite a popular service. It's mostly related to maybe backend services, but it also supports mobile, and at least it works for us at this current moment. This is how I implement logging in our app. So basically, just a simple abstract class that defines different logging levels, and then we have a single class in our app that's where we set the logger, and there each specific level uses the corresponding method over there. And also what I like to introduce in the app, I use the composite design pattern for that. So I'm using the multi-logger, meaning it's a logger that could wrap multiple loggers in your app, and as a result, you can register multiple loggers based on an environment, based on feature flags. You can even technically enable and disable a specific logger in your app in production. For instance, using this in combination with Firebase remote config, I didn't really find a usage for that, but that's technically possible with this. So yeah, so if you are developing locally, you need to see the console logs, so you can enable that. Then those will be disabled for production. You could go crazy with that. So that's how we implement logging in our apps. It's working great. And this is the result from the Datadog. How these logs are provided there. Of course, nothing fancy, nothing new, just a list of logs. But if you inspect a specific log, for instance, specifically for your app, you could see more information on how this log was produced. So you could see the operating system, you could see the device model that was used. Maybe sometimes you could see what kind of internet connectivity was at that point, whether user used Wi-Fi or maybe mobile services. Also, you can add some more context to your logs. One of those could be like session ID. So then you could, filter out logs by a specific session, and you can basically reproduce the whole steps of how a specific user get into the situation. Probably error since you're investigating this, but maybe in other, in other loops or other situations in your app. Getting to the second part is crash reports or crashlytics. And when building mobile applications, what you should have in mind is that apps are basically distributed systems, meaning once you ship your project, it's not the situation of it works on my machine anymore. If something wrong happens on a remote device, or the mobile app crashes on a mobile phone somewhere in the world, you need to make sure that you have this information, why this happened, and you should ensure that this information is sent to your services so you could inspect this later. And I consider crashlytics as logs with benefits. Basically, crashlytics provide the same information as logs, but it also puts another layer on top of that includes the analytics. That's why we call that crashlytics, right? So this analytics part provides more context about your errors. So for instance, what was the first app version when this error occurred in your app? When was the last time when you see this log? Like how many of such kind of logs you see in the application? You can, by using analytics, you can maybe some errors are just false positive ones. You can mute them and do not see them anymore in the analysis reports. So yeah, crashlytics are for that. But also have in mind that basically when we are talking about Crashlytics, usually people consider this as only as active monitoring, meaning maybe you've set up some fancy dashboards, but to get the information from there, you need to, well, look at those, inspect those and see what's provided there. So what's really useful, and you could get a little, you get to another level of that and make your life easier, is setting up alerts. So for instance, Crashlytics provides you some tooling, and let's imagine a case that you are releasing a new app version and a new error appeared that was never seen before in your application. So you could set up a new notification for that, and once the release, you will be automatically notified, like in Slack or in other messaging tool, and you'll be notified that something wrong is happening. We have never seen this before, so maybe you need to react to this. So yeah, it saves time, and you don't need to open those dashboards and keep them open 24/7. How to set up the Crashlytics. Again, this is the Datadog example, but it doesn't matter what tool you're using. It would be, I expect it would be similar for other integrations. So if you want to monitor the Flutter errors that happen in the app, you need to override Flutter error.onError callback, and these Flutter errors that are happening will be sent, in this case, to Datadog. But also, if you need to monitor any other application errors or native layer errors even, you need to override the platform dispatcher on error callback. Previously, it was more known as run zoned workaround that you needed, but after Flutter 3.3 release, actually this is the way that you don't need to use zones anymore in your apps, and you could just override this callback, and it will do the same thing. And this is how the logs with benefits look like. So it's the same log, right? You see the error, you see the stack trace, which is usually very important to see. But also at the top, you could see information like when was the first app version when this error occurred, how many of such errors occurred during your user session. So you could see those graphs. Also on the right, you could see that there's like specific routes where this error occurred. So you could investigate, whether this error is like scoped to a specific view, and you can work on that, or maybe if it's scattered across the app, maybe it's something more important to take a look. And also at the bottom, if you're using Datadog, that Datadog supports such a thing as real-time user monitoring, so you could enable that, and actually the whole session of the user is recorded, and in case something wrong happens, I think Datadog calls it replay the session, and you could see, at which specific step the error occurs and what was the information provided there and all of those details. So this is really convenient. And lastly, when we talk about app behavior monitoring, it's worth mentioning the performance metrics, and I consider those as a part of UX monitoring. Performance metrics basically provides information about frozen frames, frames per second metrics. Maybe there was some latency, maybe app launch times, that were provided, and how fast your app become available to the user. So that's important, and it basically shows how it works from the UX perspective. Also, another important part of that is application performance monitoring, or APM, and that's basically an end-to-end monitoring that will show the whole life cycle of your request sending to backend, and I will show an example later, and we can investigate this a little bit deeper. And also, at least that's what I noticed while using Datadog, these metrics are not 100% reliable for cross-platform frameworks, for Flutter specifically. So for instance, there were numbers like they showed that the app launch time for the app was 5 days, which is maybe the user waited for 5 days for the app to launch, but I don't think that's very realistic. So these kind of hiccups happen. So yeah, just bear those in mind, and yeah, maybe you can skip those, but maybe these are important. I think the tooling will evolve a little bit on cross-platform frameworks, and this will become better over time. So this is how I enable application performance monitoring and the overall real user monitoring. So for Datadog case, if you're using Navigator 2.0, you can specify the navigation observers. I'm not sure if this is available for Navigator 1.0, maybe, but it's a long time since I used that. So yeah, so there's navigation observers that basically, sends information how your users interact with the app and what was the route structure at that moment. So this information is crucial when investigating errors. And also, there's like this specific function provided by the Datadog SDK, which is enable HTTP tracking. No magic is there. It just basically adds some additional headers to your request, so those headers could be used later on to investigate the requests. And this is the example from application performance monitoring, more specifically the request tracing. This is provided as a flame chart. At the top, you could see the request that was sent from the mobile device. And later on, by getting deeper into the levels, you could see that, at which moment at which specific moment, where was the request and what was happening at that time. So for instance, you could see on the right a list of different layers that were reached at this moment. So you could see whether this request hit the cache layer, whether it reached the specific API request. Maybe your API requests maybe your API is based on microservices, so you could see what microservices were called during this request and so on. So this all of this information is useful, especially when the response times gets a little bit slower. So it's worth investigating where those requests, what took so long for a specific request to be executed. So that's it about app performance monitoring. Now we get to the a bit softer part, I would say, this user feedback. And I would like to start this category by, as a Flutter representative, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to use this quote by Bill Gates, which is usually Google versus Microsoft stuff. But Bill Gates once said that your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning, meaning that when everything is okay, it's good, you are happy, maybe you are earning some money, but if something wrong happens, users are not that easy, to get this information from. What's wrong, with your product, with your application. It's easier for them just to get to the App Store, leave a 1-star review, delete your app, and forget that. So this section is basically, we'll get a little bit deeper how to get this feedback from users and at what specific moments. So talking about internal feedback, I think the whole feedback should start from your team, especially I consider, let's take a default team in mind. You have some engineers, you have a designer, maybe PM, and and there's a designer who provides you some fancy UI. And you get those, and even though you are not a unicorn developer, the developer who is aware of the development, but also is very fond of UI and UX, and you feel that maybe some interactions feel wrong in this case. And the thing is that at this specific moment, when you start questioning the UI, you should raise questions and maybe elaborate a little bit more, because your users are probably not that technical as you are as a developer, and there's a high chance that they will be questioning these designs or this UI, this workflow in the same way. So meaning iterating on this early on with your team is very important. Also, when asking for feedback or showing something to the others, avoid the specific direct questions, but ask for stories. So instead of asking, how do you feel about this feature, maybe ask a question to the user, how was the last time that you used the order workflow? And, and maybe the user, let's consider like a basic e-commerce app, where you need to buy something from the app by using the app, like Amazon or whatnot, right? So maybe the user will try to explain you that he was skipping all of the category division, clicking on the specific category, on subcategory, selecting a specific item and buying it. It will maybe the user says that, okay, I'm just using search, and that's how I search for products. If the search does not return anything, I'm not buying. And maybe this information, this not specific question, how a specific feature worked, but when he explained how it was the last time, maybe you'll get more insights of that, and you could iterate on features that matters the most. Also, the main goal, I think, of the whole feedback thing is to automate it. So for instance, triggering automated service in your app, inside your app, maybe just leaving available meeting spots that could be scheduled by the users just to provide feedback, or automated customer service bots. just spend time to automating this, because the more you can automate, the less time you'll spend eventually, and you'll just automatically get a lot of feedback about this. And also test in production. I saw some eyebrows raised, but testing in production is healthy. So for instance, when releasing a new feature, you can always hide it under the feature flag, and if it's not performing, if it's breaking something, you can just disable it. Also, if you are releasing a new application, please consider releasing it with a group of beta testers and smaller group of people, maybe identify problems that could be resolved, and then you can be more confident when releasing the app to a bigger audience. This is an example of intercom service. In intercom, you could basically create specific surveys, and then you have an ID, and then inside the Flutter app, you can just trigger this ID and open the survey at any point you like, whether synchronously, on button click, or maybe asynchronous after getting a specific response. Maybe this feedback form will pop up, and you'll get the feedback quite quickly. Case study about knowing your product, and a little bit about how to get more out of negative feedback from the users. So I don't know if you were in this situation, but I was there at the moment when I joined the company. The app was not performing that well. We got a lot of negative reviews on the stores, and we started. The CEO basically storms into the room and asks, please improve this somehow. And the brainstorming starts, how we can improve those app reviews. Maybe we should buy them. Maybe we need to run some campaigns, to improve this. But apparently, the initial version was that whether we are even asking users to leave those reviews, and apparently that was the case. Then we started questioning how we should do that, how we should implement this, where we should do that, like in which specific place in the app, and at which specific moment. We are developers. Usually the solutioning is the easiest part to us, and there's a package for that almost every time. So for in-app reviews, we just use this package, but that provides native views, so you could use them, and it's beneficial. These work for Android and iOS, so just a native pop-up, a native modal pops up, and users could leave a review for you. But the most difficult part is, when to ask for this review and in which specific app place. So in our case, I'm working in Billow, and we are e-commerce marketplace. And since we are marketplace, we pay money for a group of people who are doing their gigs, their job. Meaning that was kind of obvious to us, actually, that the highest moment and the highest satisfaction level for the users when they will probably leave a positive app review is when they are getting paid, right? Who hates getting paid? So in the app, we had this model that basically if the user, after the payout, opens the earnings tab, it would see the model, and we are celebrating, you just got paid, let's move on. But then we realized that this is the specific and the right moment to ask for review. So we added a second model that basically asks, whether you are enjoying using this app or not. And if the answer is positive, great. The user just got paid. He likes the app, so we just pop this native model that asks for the app review. But if the user at this moment says that I'm not really enjoying the app, then we are not showing app review, because that could be risky. That could cause 1-star, 2-star reviews, or maybe some negative feedback. So then we are just opening just another modal or pop-up, or however you want to solve this from the UI perspective, and just saying, okay, sorry to hear that, but here's a link to reach out to customer support. Please give us feedback. And actually it worked. We got a lot of feedback from this modal because we have analytics. We saw how much of that was used. And I think the results speak by themselves. You could see the moment when we released this feature and how the average app rating has increased since then. And it skyrocketed. I mean, we got like 4 or 5 times more reviews just because we started asking for the users. What you should take out of this use case is that you should know the key moments of your app, the key moments when your users are the most happy about your app, maybe the lowest points of that. You should be aware of those, because those are beneficial when implementing such features. And also collect the feedback always. And even though it's negative, even though it's negative, that's exact specific feedback that you should collect. because negative feedback, as Bill Gates mentioned, is the one that you should be familiar with and then iterate on that and improve your app. Getting to the last part of this presentation is product metrics, and product metrics, is the metrics on how your app works, or how your app how it's beneficial for business, basically. And there's another quote that is once said by Jeff Atwood, which is the co-founder of Stack Overflow, if I'm right. And he said that we have to stop optimizing for programmers and start optimizing for users. And it basically says that, Flutter, Android, Swift UI, Swift in general, any other framework is just a tool to create apps. But what you really need to focus on is the overall feedback for users. When talking about app-specific metrics, the good thing about those is that they come out of the box pretty much, since you're releasing your app, in Google Play Store or App Store. You get some metrics already, like download counts, retention rates, and other information. So yeah, in the beginning that's enough, but once you need to get a little bit deeper into that, usually it comes a term of ASO, or App Store Optimization. And if you are familiar with the term of what search engine optimization, it's the same thing, but you are focusing on optimizing your app visibility in the app stores. Just getting more exposure on that. And also, again, iterating on the last section, get the most out of the app reviews and ratings from your users. So especially if that's a negative one, just collect them and work on these. This is an example of the ASO screen in AppFollow tool, which is free, by the way, if you are just using this for a single application. So after release, you could add some specific keywords in the app description or in the app title, and you could see how these keywords contributed to the exposure of your application. Maybe some users found your app using the search in the App Store and in other ways. So just seeing those metrics and see those keywords that works for your app is really beneficial. So since the service is free, I would recommend using that. And when we get to the side of analytics, realize that data usually beats opinions, meaning initially when you are releasing, especially if you're a startup, you're releasing a new application, usually what leads to you is a gut feeling that something should work and something must work sometimes. That's why you're releasing app, that's why you're creating side projects, right? But once you get the analytics ready for your application, once you see this data, then it's kind of obvious that from the data, defines what's really working and what's not. And also prefer outcomes over outputs. So that's getting back to this quote by the co-founder of Stack Overflow, is that you should optimize your app for users to improve their user experience. Maybe the most technical solution or the most impressive algorithm is not really what the user needs. Maybe a simple label change is just enough to improve your app and help the users to make their life easier. And also, once you get all the analytics, and I'm really, working on this, trying to prove to you that it's important, you have a lot of data eventually, then you shouldn't get into the position of analysis paralysis. So this is called when you get into the position when you are not making any other move without seeing the data first. I think it's quite beneficial to keep a healthy habit of like spending 80-90% on features that are based on the data, but leave that room then 10-20% of your time to get bigger bets, maybe add a feature that is not measured at all, but you feel that it's working. So do not leave this on the side, but yeah, I think what you should bring out of the slide is that rely on data usually. And how I implement analytics in our app, nothing new. I'll go through these slides pretty quick, but it's basically implemented in the same way as the logger. We have an abstract analytics class. Then we register the specific analytics sources or targets that we are using in the app. So in this case, we are using Mixpanel, we are using Intercom and Facebook. Then we define a class for all the specific analytics events that we want to inspect. So that's logout, maybe some purchase events and whatnot. And then in specific handlers of those analytics, we define what we need to actually handle. So maybe we need to send the registration event to Facebook, but we want to skip that for Mixpanel and vice versa. So we can do those in the specific handlers. And then in our code, so this is an example of sign-up form, the business logic of that. So after doing the action, we're just sending an event to our used analytics services. And then what we can see is that finally, and product managers are happy about it, we can build those fancy, colorful dashboards, and colors brings, yeah, I don't know, meaning to our lives sometimes. So but while seeing those, you could inspect the funnel reports, how is the retention rate for your users, where are those meaningful drop-off of your application, so you could see maybe onboarding will by implementing onboarding screens, maybe they will improve those numbers and not. So you can inspect everything that, and also you can inspect specific analytics events. So usually the pattern that we are using, if we are adding any new feature, always we have when we define stories in our product management board, we define a section for analytics, and we just at least consider whether we can measure what we are doing. If we can, we definitely add some new analytics events. If not, then we skip this and maybe measure it in other ways. And the last case study for today is how we run an, I would say, successful experiment, but for some of you it could sound like unsuccessful one. An experiment in product development is basically a hypothesis that needs to be validated before betting on something bigger. So like if you are planning for a really huge feature, maybe it is beneficial to implement something small first and then iterate on the solution later on. So again, our startup, we are video ads e-commerce application. So meaning maybe since we are a video company, our CEO comes to the room and he says, okay, now we have video upload, but just imagine if we would have in-app video recording or even video editing inside our app. And I don't know, we just jump into the hype train, some of us, but I'm always happy if there are some smarter people in the room who start questioning this thing, whether it's worth really spending that's a huge amount of time, for instance, implementing in-app video editing, which will probably implement a lot of code on the native layer, and it's just a very, very huge feature. And yeah, implementing big features, the problem with those is that these are really time consuming. It takes a lot of time to implement something really huge. And also time is money. So, you will probably spend a lot of resources implementing something big. So you need to find the smallest MVP that you could ship and validate your feature, whether it would be even required or it would be even wanted by the users. So, for instance, in video upload, what we do is that we are using image picker plugin, and it basically wraps the native upload code, and it just selects the video from your gallery and it uploads it. And we realized that this plugin also supports recording, like in-app recordings. Like you can upload this from your gallery, but you can also choose the camera as your source. And we said, okay, so that's basically getting in-app video recording out of the box without that much of an effort to implement this, right? So yeah, we realized we are already using this plugin, so why not? So on the right, you could see what we did. So basically, when the user taps on a button to upload something, we provided two options, whether you want to upload something from the gallery or you want to record it. And yeah, this is the implementation. As I mentioned, we provide those two options. Of course, after that, we send the analytics event to check what option was chosen by the user. And the results came back, and apparently only 6% of users are using in-app recording. And we said that maybe if the in-app recording is used by only 6% of the users, we are not even talking about in-app video editing at this moment in our business. So that's kind of a successful experiment because we haven't spent time on a feature that maybe won't be used by the users. Yeah, it happens. So what you need to take out of this use case is that think big, always think about big features, but always starts with smaller parts first and then iterate on them. If the experiment is successful, just improve on it. And also failed experiment does not mean a failure. Maybe, this feature is not that beneficial to the users. At least we validated that we won't need to spend the resources to implement that. And also take the results with a grain of salt. if the in-app video recording wasn't used, it doesn't mean that the in-app video editing won't be used. You know, that's an assumption that should be validated, but yeah, always keep a sane mind on that, and you can work later on this. And summary of today's presentation and what I would like for you to bring out of this is that app observability techniques that were introduced in this presentation should be implemented as soon as possible. Most of them are free, so I just don't see a reason why you shouldn't do that. Also, enable feedback loops and experiments, so always ask for feedback from your users because they are using it and they know the best how the app feels for them. And also prefer outcome over outputs, meaning provide value to the users and yeah, just create apps that are beneficial to the users and create something that will be used by a lot of people. Save 3, stay solid. Thank you. And yeah, thank you for joining.